Hello, this is Digital Accessibility, the people behind the progress. I'm Joe Walensky, the creator and host of this series. And as an accessibility professional myself, I find it very interesting as to how others have found their way into this profession. So let's meet one of those people right now and hear about their journey. All right, well, let's get started. And today I am meeting with Jack Nicolai from Adobe. Hello, Jack. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Doing great. Thank you.
Well, I'm at my home office on Vashon Island near Seattle. Where are you talking to us from?
Also from Seattle itself.
All right. Yeah, it's been a difficult year the past year, but it's good to be able to see you. We've talked by email and LinkedIn and things like that before, and I believe we've met at your facility when when facilities were open. You were located at it was the Fremont facility in Seattle. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's a great location, right by the Fremont Bridge.
Yeah, it's really beautiful.
Yeah, it's really nice. I thought we'd, just start off with you talking a little bit about, what your position is right now and what you're involved with at Adobe.
Yeah. So I'm a senior product manager of accessibility. A lot of my focus is on some of our creative cloud products, as well as our web products or web properties like adobe.com. And so, how I engage with different teams kind of can vary depending upon where a product is in its life cycle, whether it's something brand new that we're building. And so I'm working closely with the product manager and, let's say, the designers to help craft new features with accessibility first in mind, and then often acting as an educator to help drive accessibility into that early work, as well as then supporting engineering and test, so that as they are building and validating the work, that they're also keeping accessibility in mind. So really helping to drive accessibility into all the different steps of a software development lifecycle. And in some cases, myself and my teammates are working with products that have been around a while, and so really getting in and evaluating what's the current state of that application from an accessibility standpoint, providing feedback and helping to drive roadmaps to remediate those products and raise the bar in terms of their accessibility.
Well, I wanted to definitely talk with you a little bit about some of the details of that work. But one of the things that I like to do in this series is just get a little bit of idea of, what people's backgrounds were and how they ended up into accessibility. It seems like in this area, everybody has a different story that brought them here. So tell us a little bit about what your journey was like.
Yeah, I think my first exposure to accessibility was really early in my career. I started getting into web development right at the near the year 2000, and so in 2000 was actually the first time that I got a job with really a technology related company, which was an e-learning company based out of the Minneapolis area. And in working, of course, with an e-learning company, they had a focus on accessibility in everything that we were building. And so I was really exposed to the need and the value of accessibility early in my career. I sort of diverged from it for a number of years as I ended up doing a lot of Flash development, which was never really an accessible platform at the time, and doing a lot of online advertising. I would say, sort of lost myself in the woods for a while when it came to accessibility. But fast forward several years, I ended up moving to Seattle and pursuing a job with Starbucks at their corporate location, working as a front-end development lead for Starbucks.com. And as a company, Starbucks really has a clear focus on the customer. And as a part of that focus on the customer really includes ensuring access for those customers. Really showed up first in their physical spaces and making sure that their physical spaces are accessible, and then more and more was growing into how do we make sure that all the digital touch points are accessible as well, whether that's the website or the mobile apps or touch screens in the stores, different things like that. And so, really, in that time, my exposure and my interest in accessibility really grew quite a lot. And as you meet customers who have a variety of different needs, it really helps, I think, to open your eyes about the kinds of gaps that exist, the kinds of needs that people have, how ways that you can support them. You know, ultimately, there's also a business interest as well, which is we want customers to be able to buy our products, right? And so, I think those things just align really well in terms of their corporate mission. And so, in that time at Starbucks, really worked hard at actually starting to build up a more concrete, like accessibility program. And and during my time at Starbucks, actually had my own experience with temporary disability. Um, there's a sort of very rare neurological disorder called Maldo-de-Barkmoth syndrome, which most people experience after exposure to some kind of passive motion. You'll often hear about people who go on a cruise for a week or something like that, and they get back and they never really feel like they've gotten off the boat. They experience a continuous rocking sensation. It causes problems with equilibrium, focus, fatigue, a whole variety of symptoms. But as a collection, they make it very hard to concentrate, very hard to function. And so I had my own experience with that, and ended up on temporary disability for a month. Even beyond that, it was several months in recovery, finding it very hard, difficult to work. And so, really helped to also personalize accessibility work from my own perspective. And so, sort of a number of things in that experience working at Starbucks really for me helped to crystallize both my desire and my passion around accessibility. And then I just really happened upon an opportunity with Adobe, happened to see a job posting for the work that I'm doing now. And for myself, I grew up on Adobe and Macromedia products. They were the things that allowed me to drive my career forward, really to help. I mean, it was being an expert at those products was really my career. And so I really felt and continue to feel a real responsibility for helping to make Adobe's products accessible, so that a young developer or designer, designer, if you have a passion and you want to work in the industry, Adobe products are some of the premier products to use. You need to be able to use them to really, I think, measure up in the workforce. And so to be able to enable more and more people the ability to unlock their own creativity really has been my goal.
Well, just going back a little bit, you mentioned that you'd done some early work with accessibility, and then there was a break, and then you had that substantive work with Starbucks, and now into Adobe, and so you've had a kind of a long time spectrum for that. But just from your own experiences, do you have any feelings of what has changed in the area of accessibility for digital products and services from the kind of the earlier times to now? I know when I reflect on it, I started working on it around 1998, 99, and there's some things I could talk to you about where I'm kind of amazed at how much progress has been made, and then there's other things where it's like, wow, I really thought we'd be at a different place, when I was thinking about it 20 years ago. Has anything, come to mind about, along those lines?
Well, certainly, I think that because of the web content accessibility guidelines developing over time and those becoming more robust, and people's awareness, in the industry, um, I think that has been a real benefit because people have a roadmap to some degree to follow about ways to make their content more accessible, whether they choose to follow that or not. But and tooling has gotten better, right? Products like Axe or other automated test tooling, so that it enables people to have more insight into the level of accessibility of their products. I mean, those kinds of things just didn't exist before. And so I think those are ways that things have gotten better and grown over time. I think there's always going to be a need for education. And I'm trying to remember the program with the colleges access, I forget the name of it now, but this there's a program with universities to help drive accessibility into curriculum. And so things like that, I think, are really good signs that accessibility and inclusive design continue to become more and more involved, included, I guess, in the work that people are doing. I talk to more and more product designers and inclusive designers or UX designers that are really excited about accessibility. I think one of the bigger challenges right now is just barriers that we often find within organizations, often from people who don't necessarily understand accessibility at the time. And so they're often, with that lack of understanding, often prioritize other things in the business over accessibility. And so it can be hard for someone like a product designer who really wants to do the right thing and is really trying to drive accessibility work for their customers, driving up against problems with product management, not prioritizing that kind of work. And so I think, some things never change really, but we still need to continue, I think, that process of education.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll continue to have more and more people paying attention to it. And I know I feel as well that a lot of new people that I see coming into it through my work at the University of Washington will have some knowledge or want to talk about it. And that's something that's different than 5-8 years ago. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, even recently, we, in the last year or so, hired one of our UX researchers specifically for researching accessibility within our organization, which was just a position that didn't exist before. And so, we're really made the commitment to center accessibility within our research group as well.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's definitely a progressive step to get that going so early in the product development process. You mentioned your own experiences with what I guess is maybe the illness that you had. Uh, I guess would sort of be like a cognitive physical challenge. I'm not familiar with that one exactly, but when I think about different physical categories like sight and sound and mobility, and then there's cognitive issues. That to me is always the one that is the one that digital products and services really don't dig into or necessarily have the greatest solutions. In my experience, I've helped in volunteer situations with people who've had accidents, traumatic brain injury, and things like that. And when you're trying to help them, even something as simple as setting up a Gmail account, creating a right mental model for people with cognitive issues can be really different. So I don't know what your experiences were, but like how does cognitive, what were your experiences with that, and how does that fit into the work that you do today?
Hmm. Um, well, at the time, my experience, because of, like, I was experiencing in some respects kind of a sensory overload, because of this constant rocking sensation. It was taking up so much of kind of my conscious energy. It made it hard to concentrate, to actually sort of sit down and get work done. I couldn't focus, and it created just a lot of like mental fatigue as well. And I think that the cognitive piece is challenging. It's hard because I think that because there are so many different forms of cognitive disability. You can try to move one sort of solution forward, but it only maybe helps 3 out of 5 people. And in some cases you might actually have solutions that are sort of like in competition with one another. I mean, uh, I think that there can be a number of different kinds of solutions to your point, whether it's providing a Gmail account in some situation. But I don't know. I mean, um, I think that even WCAG struggles with cognitive as well. The W3C. I mean, I think that in conversations that I've had that are in people involved with the W3C, like it's a challenge to try to actually create actual standards around cognitive issues. I mean, I think the best that we try to do is to provide a clear, simple interface that doesn't do things like play animations that are distracting. I mean, it can be little things like that, using clear labeling, using uh, uh, language that's going to be understandable at lower grade levels, just to make things simpler. And I think, ultimately in the end, it comes down to user testing, right? You've just got to get it in front of users to find out whether or not it's going to be challenging for one audience or another. Um, so I don't know if that
Yeah.
completely answers your
Yeah,
question.
no, that's great. I mean, it's like I mentioned at the very start of my comment. I think the most difficult area of the different physical challenges. Well, maybe we could talk a little bit about what you have going on right now. Are there any, highlights from recent work, things that Adobe has out there that people may be familiar with or could look to? To kind of see the manifestations of what you've done. I think people are always looking for examples of what others are doing and finding success with.
Yeah. Well, we, and I'm sort of speaking for one of my colleagues, but there is something called liquid mode for PDFs, and it is a relatively new product release for Acrobat and PDF that actually allows PDF content to reflow to mobile devices without actually originally being formatted for mobile. There's a lot of like machine learning and AI behind it that actually allows all that content to be reflowed automatically, which then makes that content accessible in a lot of different form factors, essentially. We had released in the last, I believe, year a level of support for voice control in our product Adobe XD, so that on the Mac using voice control, you can actually drive features of the XD application itself, like interacting with the menus and the canvas and other things like that. So for people who may have, let's say, a motor disability or uh, typically unable to use the mouse, they can use voice control. And I think we've made a lot of improvements for Adobe.com over the last few years, and so for me, Adobe.com is really the entry point for most of our customers to buy, subscribe, to learn to modify things about their account. And so I think that really making sure that the Adobe.com experience is an accessible one has been really important to me. And then more recently, we've held because of the pandemic, we've driven all of our events to be completely online events. And so I've worked very closely with the Adobe Max team, which was last fall, and then our Adobe Summit conference, which was just here in April, and really working to ensure that we are delivering an accessible conference experience. And where Adobe Max, before the pandemic, we had about, I think our last conference in person was about 14,000 people. there were over 250,000 registrations for the most recent Adobe
Wow.
Mac. And so, that's a lot of exposure for that content
Yeah.
in a very short amount of time. And so, helping to support features like captioning for all of the sessions, both recorded and live, to make sure that it's an inclusive experience for everyone.
Yeah, that's amazing. Those numbers grew like that. There's one other part I want thing I want to ask you about, which I ask a lot of people about because it's an interest area of mine. Is kind of like how an organization has its overall accessibility process baked in. So some organizations, especially larger ones, may have a kind of a centralized accessibility group that then informs individual divisions and departments and provide resources and guidance and things like that. And others may be more laissez-faire, may even just be about a certain evangelist in one area, and then that percolates to others, and they try to string together a common or a complete solution. There's everything in between. So I was kind of wondering how things are set up at Adobe.
Yeah. Well, more like you described at the beginning, we do have a centralized team. We do have a governance program that we basically plug accessibility into a larger Adobe governance program that also manages other topics like security and internationalization. And so we leverage that to help drive accessibility requirements throughout the company, and to make clear what the expectations are, and to set milestones for teams to actually meet around accessibility goals. And as a part of that structure, we also identify accessibility champions per product. And actually, depending upon the size of product, the size of a product, we may actually identify multiple champions just because to scale across the product. So yeah, centralized team, governance program, and champions, and then, as you were saying earlier, like our centralized team then acts often on a consulting basis to help drive accessibility requirements, to help educate, and essentially be that centralized hub for accessibility excellence.
All right, great. Well, yeah, I appreciate all of these insights, and also for you taking the time to chat with me today. And good luck with all of your continued efforts in accessibility at Adobe.
Oh, thank you so much for your time.